Question number 10, Iain Lees-Galloway.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Workplace Relations and Safety and asks, is the government planning to ban zero-hour employment contracts? If not, why not?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Minister for Workplace Relations and Safety, may I first note for the member that his leader last week claimed that the Minister of Economic Development had responsibility for zero-hour contracts, and of course he does not. While the term 0 hours means different things to different people, the government does have concerns.
Order.
The government does have concerns with some of the reported aspects of some of the so-called zero-hour contracts, and have asked officials to look into those allegations and reports as part of our current review into employment standards. I'm primarily concerned with practices where mutual obligations are unbalanced, and we will address those as required. However, we don't have plans to ban employers and employees from having legitimate casual agreements that suit both parties.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, Iain Lees-Galloway.
Can the Minister describe to the House what he believes a zero-hour contract is and how it differs from a casual agreement?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Minister, there have always been legitimate working arrangements called casual employment agreements. In these arrangements, workers, as and when required, the employer does not guarantee the individual any work, but the individual is also not obliged to accept any work or be exclusively available for that employer. Employment relations, of course, require mutual obligations. Where flexibility is important for both employers and employees, casual employment arrangements can strike this balance. However, there are sometimes practices where there is a relationship of mutual obligations that are inconsistent with good faith. The sort of things that I've asked officials to report back on specifically include agreements that unnecessarily restrict lower skilled workers from undertaking alternative employment, rostering practices including short notice cancellation of shifts, and also other matters that have been brought to attention in recent times, including inappropriate pay deductions such as service station attendants having pay docked for customer theft.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, Iain Lees-Galloway.
Will his proposed changes to the Employment Relations Act require permanent employment agreements to include regular hours of work?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Well, Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Minister, it depends whether the member is referring to permanent part-time, fixed-term and full-time employments, and those matters are covered in the law today. What we're talking about specifically here is a certain type of casual contract where perhaps, and I stress again that it's being investigated currently, where perhaps individuals are having onerous requirements placed on them when their contracts are very much on a casual basis. Those are the things we'll be investigating, and I don't plan to make announcements today on exactly what changes to legislation would be made at this time.
Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Iain Lees-Galloway.
Does he appreciate that people on zero-hour contracts don't have the flexibility that a casual contract gives them? And does he also appreciate that people who are on zero-hour contracts can't get a loan or a hire purchase agreement because they can't demonstrate certainty of income, or they have to rearrange childcare from one week to the next, or they suddenly lose hours without any warning? How does that make life better for people on those contracts?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Well, Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Minister, we're in danger of violently agreeing on this concern. And the simple fact of the matter is that we will be investigating these matters. As I said previously, there are legitimate casual agreements, but it's important that onerous obligations aren't placed on employees when they don't have fixed, defined hours in which they will be working. And that's the exact stuff that we'll be investigating.
Supplementary question, Tim McIndoe.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. What reports has the Minister seen of other unconventional employment contract arrangements?
Insofar as there's reports that are of ministerial responsibility.
Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Minister,
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
I saw a report of a particularly strange one just this day. A long-serving, self-employed professional was hired for what he describes as a small freelance job. He dutifully carried out the work and provided follow-up notes and also an invoice for payment. Mr Speaker, the issue in this particular case is that the professional, a journalist, was not paid. 4 months have now passed. Numerous phone calls and emails have been made with apparently no response. Now, this is obviously not a 0 hours contract. It could perhaps be better described as a zero payment contract, Mr Speaker. The employer in this case being then leadership aspirant for the Labour Party, one Andrew Little, current Labour leader.
Order. Order. Question number 11, Brett Hudson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Order. I've called Brett Hudson.